I call our Board of County Commissioner meetings back to order out of executive session, and we do have two items of business to take care of. So Commissioner Wendling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, Commissioners, I'd like to make a motion that we approve a purchase and sales agreement and additional documents with a earnest money amount of $100,000 towards the purchase property.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I would second that.
Any discussion regarding that? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you. Commissioner Shanefield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to postpone tab G to the next meeting on December 20th.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion regarding postponing tab G? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Then we will go to tab P with Mr. Brubaker from the Southwest Wyoming Regional Airport giving us an update. Hello.
Hello. I think it'll pop up there. Maybe.
Tab G is the one for you.
Presentation automatically pop up. Sorry, I should have told you that. Coordination. Yeah.
Pay no attention to the lady behind the curtain. Yes, she's the mastermind back there. There we go.
All right, perfect. Well, I want to take the opportunity here towards the end of the year and also towards the end of some terms for some of you to come update you on things here at the airport, both maybe a slight year in review and also a look forward, and then answer any questions you all have. So I was here back, I believe in April. It seems like that was just yesterday. But I think I came and talked to you all around April about air service and a lot of the challenges that we were facing with pilot shortage, fuel costs, and a whole host of issues related to air service. So some of this will be an update on that. So bear with me. But I think it's important for you guys to kind of understand some of the issues. So I titled this 2022 a year of stifled recovery. And I think it's probably the best way to describe it. So the aviation industry experienced a post-pandemic honeymoon phase. That is what we're calling it in the industry, where there was an extreme amount of pent-up demand. And some might say that was what we thought would happen, but I'll tell you, our industry did not think that was what was going to happen. We thought that we would not see 2019 numbers in our industry until around 2024, 2025. You probably remember, for some of you, remember that back at the beginning of the pandemic, when I came in here and explained the dire situation, we had lost 96% of our business basically overnight, that this is going to be years of recovery. Well, the demand came back much quicker than anybody anticipated. And by the end of 2021, there was more demand for air travel than what existed in 2019. The problem was there's not enough pilots to fly the aircraft to serve that demand. And I won't spend a lot of time today diving into why the pilot shortage exists, because I've done that with you all previously. But what's really interesting, and I said there that most airlines and airports are unable to meet the increased demand due to the lack of available labor. And the chart that's on that slide shows the TSA throughput. So the number of people going through TSA checkpoints here in the United States, you could see all the way back to April 2020, 5% of 2019 numbers went through the TSA checkpoints. And then in November of this year, 94%. So we still haven't been able to capitalize on that increased demand as an industry. We still are 6% lower than 2019 numbers nationwide in November because of the fact that there's not enough pilots to fly aircraft. So what that really is resulted in is a crisis level shortage of pilots in the United States, has forced airlines to cut schedules. mostly to smaller communities, and the numbers support that. With too few of pilots to serve today's routes, there's fewer options. Comparing 2022 to 2019, more than 300 airports have lost up to a quarter of their air service nationwide. More than 160 of those airports have lost more than a quarter of their service, us being one of those 160. Major U.S. passenger and cargo airlines hired an astounding 11,372 pilots through October of this year, this calendar year. And that's likely to grow north of 13,500 by the end of this month. Domestically, the problem is we only produce 5,000 to 7,000 pilots a year. So you look at that delta, where's the other 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 pilots coming from? They're being hired from the regional air carriers, and they're being hired from corporate aviation and from private aviation. So that's where the big issue comes, is there's not enough pilots at the regional level to be able to capitalize on the demand. Results and headlines that look a lot like these, and they're awfully small. But one of the ones that stood out to me, these are all just from November 2021 through June of 2022, sorted headlines. But one that stood out is Toledo is the largest U.S. city to lose air service due to pilot shortage. That was in June of this year. And you sit there and think about the population of Toledo. I didn't look it up, but having lived in Ohio, it's north of a couple 100,000, and they completely lost all of their air service. And it's not like they're right next door. They're semi-close to, say, South Bend or Cleveland, but they're still several hours away. In a metro area the size of Toledo, to lose all of their air service is very telling of what's happening in our industry. There's a whole list of headlines there of different service cuts. Southwest cutting 20,000 flights due to labor shortage. That's back in April. I could go on and on. There's headlines I could Google. If you Google search it, you could spend weeks reading all the news stories about pilot shortage and lost flights. The little infograph there on the side, you've seen that before. It was in my April presentation, but it's the best representation of what's causing the pilot shortage. Is you have the outflow of pilots being all the retirements. If you remember, the mandatory retirement age is 65. You have the growth of U.S. air travel and international air travel. And then you have the staffing the larger aircraft. The airlines are buying larger aircraft and parking the smaller, which requires more staffing. And they're longer trips usually, which means you have less frequencies throughout the day. And then the inflow issue is the increased regulation on the training requirements from Congress, the financial hurdles of entry for new pilots, and then the low cost or the low pay for new pilots, which, as I presented to you in April, has changed dramatically. The one outlier in April was SkyWest had not increased their pilot pay yet. Recently, they agreed to new pilot pay that in some cases either doubled or quadrupled pilot pay at SkyWest Airlines. So it made it very, very complicated for small communities like ours to have sustainable air service. Some maps. This is a map that shows that American, Delta, and United have exited a total of 63 airports since the pandemic began. United has 11 more that are in the pipeline. They're listed there on the right side. But you'll notice that air carriers are just not just reducing service, but they're just getting up and leaving markets entirely. So that's a pretty telling map when you look at the cities that are on there that are much bigger than us. When you look at Oakland, you look at I'm looking at maybe trying to pick out some that are known. Peoria, Illinois, Dubuque, Iowa. I'm very familiar with Dubuque. Their population is very similar to Casper's, and they are completely without air service today. They will be in the next couple of weeks getting a new airline called Avelo, which will be just twice weekly service to Orlando. So it'll be leisure travel only, not to connect business travel. But there's a whole list of cities there that are much larger than ours. This is a map that shows the black dots are communities that have lost 100% of their air service. There's a few dots missing there because it's up to 14 cities now have lost all of their air service nationwide. The orange dots, they're kind of hard to see on that gray background, have lost less than 25%, and the red dots have lost more than 25%. Going back to those numbers I shared with you earlier, you'll notice we're one of the red dots, as is Riverton and as is Casper. So enough of that negative. I've talked a lot about all that negative in April. I wanted to take an opportunity to look back at, I tried to think when each of your terms started. Obviously, Doc, you've been here, I think, since the day I walked in the door on the commission. So I went all the way back and tried to identify some of the projects. It feels that way now. I've been here more than 7.5 years now. I know that's not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things, but it's been the longest stop in my career. But I remember early on some of the projects. I remember coming in here thinking I was a know-it-all, coming in here, with these crazy ideas that I was going to come and convince the commission that we needed to do to propel the airport. And I didn't always go about it in the best ways, and created some heartburn maybe with some previous commissioners. If you're out there listening, sorry. But over the years, we've accomplished a lot together, whether you've been here as long as I have with Doc or you're newer commissioners. There's a lot that you've been part of and helped us to really happen at the airport. And this is just a brief list. There's a whole lot more than this, but sometimes it's easiest to quantify things in dollars and cents. So I'm not going to read through all these projects, but these are just some capital projects that have been accomplished in the 7 years that I've been here, 7.5 years that I've been here. And the numbers are pretty telling. So if the slide will change, there we go. Total of $67.8 million of investment at the airport. It's actually more than that with some other smaller projects. But overall, 96.1% of those projects were grant funded. So that really down to 3.9% of local money ends up being just between $2 and $3 million over 7.5 years to be able to accomplish all of this work. So a huge testament to those of you sitting here, those of you that came before you. And just a big thank you for the support. I know that I've had to answer some tough questions from time to time. I've had to wait while somebody stews on things, or what is it you say, Roy? Marinates. Yeah, while somebody marinates on something. Well, stews, marinates, it's all cooking. We share barbecue tips and advice back and forth.
Marinate in two different.
So, but anyway, it's been a pleasure working with all of you. I know 2 of you will continue to get to work with you, and I'm sure the other 3 of you, our paths will cross again in the future. And I look forward to however that may be. But it's been an honor working with you, and it wouldn't have been possible to accomplish all of this and the growth that we've seen at the airport without your support. So just really want to thank you for that. With that said, I also want to look at what's coming up, what's looking in the future. And this is just a quick summary of some things that are on our radar right now. Obviously, wrapping up the commercial terminal modernization project is top of mind, and we're eager to get that done. We're working on innovative air service development approaches. Obviously, I've addressed the pilot shortage and how that's impacted rural American air service. I'm actually leaving out tomorrow morning at, 5:36 a.m. On the flight to head to Chicago to meet with United Airlines to start talking about some of these innovative ideas on how we could protect what we have and maybe grow upon it in the current climate that we're facing. So we're going to have a heavy focus on that this winter. I've never been so excited to be part of a planning project. I hate planning projects because all you get is a binder with a bunch of paper in it. You don't get, a tangible asset that you can be proud of. But I'm really excited this year. We get to undertake our 20-year master plan. Every 10 years, airports have to do a 20-year master plan. And this master plan is going to be focused heavily on the commercial aviation growth, general aviation growth, advanced air mobility, which is unmanned aerial vehicles and small electric aircraft, 4-seater, 6-seater aircraft that do vertical takeoff, and they're all electric based. We'll also be looking at our requirement by the federal government to be carbon neutral by 2050. We are required, and it will be an obligation of our federal grants to be carbon neutral by 2050. So we're looking at things like carbon capture and sequestration on airport property. We are looking at utility scale solar development. We're looking at hydrogen propulsion development when it comes to aviation. So there's a lot of really neat technologies and neat things that we're going to be looking at. I have my current dream is that we'll be the first airport in the world to be able to offer carbon capture and sequestration right on property. Right now, a lot of companies will have to buy carbon credits and then they just hope that they're being used for something somewhere else in the world in a legal and ethical manner. And I don't intend to get into the political argument on whether carbon capture is necessary or not, but if somebody's willing to pay for it and we have the means to monetize that, it is my intention, and as of now, our board's intention to find ways to monetize that. So we've been working with the School of Energy Resources at UW, the Wyoming Energy Authority, and we've had preliminary discussions with some private enterprise as well about the opportunities. And I think there's an opportunity, not just at the airport, but with the Middle Baxter project to also be looking towards a carbon neutral future, a carbon neutral business park or industrial park. So there's a lot of opportunities right out there in the airport, Simplot, Middle Baxter area with the Rock Springs uplift. Our legislature was very proactive, I will say, when it comes to carbon capture, and have delegated who owns the pore space. And while the airport does not own our mineral rights underneath the airport, we do own the pore space. So that gives us that opportunity to potentially monetize that storage space underneath the airport. So we are eager to be part of the big grant programs that the School of Energy Resources and the Wyoming Energy Authority and the Wyoming Business Council are partnering on with the Department of Energy for both a hydrogen hub and for a DAC hub, a direct air capture hub. So we're excited to be part of that conversation. Sweetwater County, Southwest Wyoming really could be the epicenter for both those technologies for decades to come. And I think the airport can play a critical role in that as well. Beyond that, we just got done this summer submitting our capital plan to YDOT and the FAA. The next 10 years is a 10-year, $70.7 million capital plan. Right now, we have grants allocated, if you will, that would cover 77% of that cost. The other 23%, I'm working on other funding solutions for that. As I have always done, this county commission, future county commissions, city councils will not be my first stop. And I will continue to find funding wherever else I can do that, whether it's through logical and defensible debt service that makes sense for the airport, backed by the revenue from the projects, whether that's through state or private or local grants. We'll pursue all those before we come to the local governing bodies for any financial support. So the big project that's anchoring and is a bulk of that cost is right now, and I've brought this up to you before, we are likely to have to do a full depth, full length reconstruction of our primary runway at the airport. That's currently estimated to cost $45 million. And that will be towards the end of this decade, beginning of the next decade. The airport board has exercised some foresight there as well. We have started to set aside money every year to cover that local match because it will be much higher than a normal grant being that much. So we are setting aside money in reserves every year to be able to cover that local match when that project comes along. So it's not a big hit to the city or the county. So why do we do it? I shared this slide with you last time I was here, but why do we put all this effort in that we continue to do? And it's because of the economic impact of the airport to the community. We support in a normal year, almost 27,000 visitors to our community each year. We support 324 direct and indirect jobs. That amounts to $11.3 million of payroll, $21 million of annual spending, $1.4 million of annual tax revenue, and almost $37 million overall of economic activity supported in our local community by the airport. So that's really why we do it, why it's our strategic plan. If you look at our strategic plan, which is due for a refresh after the pandemic, we'll likely do that in early 2023, but it is heavily focused on being an economic catalyst for Southwest Wyoming. So I imagine the overall theme will continue. We just need to refine the measurable outcomes under each of our pillars based on what has happened and transpired over the last couple of years in our industry. So with that, just want to thank you all once again. I think I did it earlier, but it's been a true honor to work with those of you that are not going to be here, 30 days from now in these seats. I look forward to our paths crossing on other business endeavors or government endeavors, whatever they may be, and wish you all well. And I look forward to continuing to work with Mary and Lauren with the new commission, and Keaton and Island and Rob. So just thank you. Happy to answer any questions you all have.
Thank you, Devin. Much appreciated. And questions for Devin?
Still never got a ride in the new snowplow.
You haven't come up during a snowstorm.
True. Very good. Well, thank you. Much appreciated. Yeah, the work has been excellent, and continue carrying on with what you've been doing. That dollar amount of grant percentage is just amazing. So carry on with that. Don't stop doing that, and bring in great resources to our area or county at minimal cost to the taxpayers here. So much appreciated.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
We will move on then to tab Q. Commissioner Wendling.
Thank you. Tab Q deals with, we've been contacted again by the WCCA attorney that works with their public lands and federal funding. And again, the WCCA is going to oversee a NEPA grant to help facilitate hopefully 23 counties working together to work on the sage grouse amendments for this next year and a half. They've requested that Sweetwater County join them and being part of that endeavor. Right now, as it stands, there's 11 or 12, maybe 13 counties that have been made that commitment. The NEPA grant would hire 2 consultants who would lead. One of those consultants would be assigned to, the counties would be divided amongst the 2 consultants to work with them to come up with the alternatives for that sage grouse amendment plan. And the cost to it, as the state office is asking for skin in the game, is they figure it's going to be about $22,000 total dollars. But that will be divided amongst the counties that are involved. And right now they feel there's 11. So it's about 2,000. And of course, every county that joins, that amount gets less. What are the advantages of doing this? First of all, you got 23 counties or 15 or 18. Who knows what the number is going to end up. But you end up with numbers. You end up with strength in numbers. You end up with a group sitting down and writing alternatives that they see that are best for the entire state. That's the advantage of it. Another advantage of it is that this is a true representation of what the people want that own the public lands, that are invested in them throughout the state as well as neighboring states. We know that this region for the sage grouse amendments to be looked at and alternatives rewritten is going to involve more than just Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, the whole western region, Idaho, Montana. And so there's also that conversation of the possibility of there being a coalition of states that come together. Time is going to be about 18 months. The one thing that's important in this, there isn't many opportunities that the governor's office sees that counties can come together and work on one thing in commonality. There's strong support out of the governor's office that this collaboration takes place between the counties, because it's one of the few times where counties can work together and come up with commonality where we all know there's times it can't. I even believe it'll be 23 counties, not 22 and Teton County. It'll be 23.
That would be different than.
So basically where we need to do is they're working on moving forward. The only role WCCA is going to have in this is oversight of the NEPA grant, if it's granted, and providing support and possibly some supplies or something, whatever is needed. And then of course they'll get reimbursed, but they're totally only overseeing the grant. They are not going to do the lead. The lead will come with the consultants that they're going to hire. So what we need to do is, first of all, decide if it's a value for us to, first of all, be part of a larger group, writing alternatives for these amendments, or writing amendments. Second of all, do we believe that the right thing to do is, this is a representation of all the people who have a value in public lands? It's not like a private land thing. This is public lands representing all the people of the United States, but mainly all the people of Wyoming. And third of all, supporting the governor's office in a belief that this is something that's viably important to do as a group, that type of thing. Mr. Chairman, it's just a matter of being involved or not with a vote. There is that option for our CLG to be part of it, but they don't have to be. They can go off on their own. But if they go out, the biggest fear again of the government or of the governor's office is that will the amendments be in conflict of one another? And it's better to work together than in conflict. I truly believe you will see counties working on this. And do we want to be in conflict, or do we want to be part of it? And I would hope we'd want to be a part of it. So when the time's right, I'll make a motion in the affirmative of joining. But now it's time for you as other commissioners to have questions for one another. I know Commissioner Toman has looked into this and visited with WCCA, although I did get a call to bring it before the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wendling. Is there a timeline on this, or is this something?
ASAP.
Okay.
We need to, so they can start moving forward. There's an 18-month review process of completion for the amendments. So they need to know who's aboard, who's not, so they can get the consultants and get it organized and get moving. They're kind of behind the 8 ball.
Is there
Mr. Chairman, yes,
Just-
there
just-
is.
just, hold on, just with public comment, advertising, since it wasn't on our regular agenda, is it something that we can discuss and then take action on at our next meeting? Or is this urgent enough that it needs to be done today? I'm not sure we would receive comment, but maybe we would. I don't know.
With these types of issues, we haven't before.
Just asking.
We've made a decision, said we're going to be a part of it or we're not.
Okay.
That's our jobs as commissioners. Is it important enough for our public representation to be a part of what we know about the government and how they facilitate these things? And we also know how hard it is to work with sometimes the federal agencies, and when you're in a small group, but with a large group, especially one is supported by the governor's office and that type of thing through a NEPA grant, and that knows that it carries the weight of the WCCA. I mean, everybody says those brown tags together
Yep.
when you're at the legislature makes a difference. Is this one of those things that we want to look out for the future? I mean, is it going to have impact on possibly rewriting regulations and stuff? I don't know, but is it possible that the alternatives might help us with exploration, oil and that type of thing? Who knows? But they're all alternatives. A group is better, a large group, strength in numbers that are especially county commissioners versus a small group of people that work in a building and,
Thank you.
I don't know.
I was just concerned about the timing. That would, that.
No, the
that's-
timing's important that we either join or don't join.
Thank you. Commissioner Tillman, you started,
That was a rousing speech, Doc. But I have to give a little bit of background. 17 years ago, we formed a coalition of local governments to deal with all federal plans and projects that were happening in Southwest Wyoming. During that time, we had 6 conservations who are still a member of that in Southwest Wyoming, covering 19 million acres. We have hired probably the best lawyers in the West, Connie Brooks out of Denver, and she has since retired. Danielle Betancourt, a Wyoming licensed lawyer, has worked for Connie for 12 years. We have commented from day one. When the governor formed the Sage Grouse Working Group, we have been involved with them, providing comments. We have hired Dr. Renee Taylor to give us sage grouse research. We've coordinated with grants with the University of Utah to do sage grouse studies. And we have consistently, as a coalition of, at that time, it was 6 counties, 6 conservation districts, or 5 counties and 6 conservation districts, provided comments on the first NEPA document for sage grouse amendments in 2012. Okay, then the government turned it back and says you have to redo it. So in 2015, we commented again. Our coalition has consistently been commenting. We, as elected officials, meet once a week, all day long, to discuss every federal plan and project that is happening in Southwest Wyoming. Every oil and gas project, every federal resource management plan. We're right now waiting for final decisions on the Rock Springs Resource Management Plan. We're working with the Ashley National Forest to finalize their plan. We are working on the Flaming Gorge National Recreation Area Plan, which has a cooperator, meaning we have been cooperators during the pre-decisional processes. Before these plans go public, we have, as local elected officials, provided the input in these plans. We have used legal professionals. So I don't say anything against what Doc is saying, but Micah Christensen, the lawyer for WCCA, he has also been calling me and he said, we need to coordinate. I agree with him, but our lawyers do coordinate with the governor's office. She does coordinate with the Department of Ag. We share comments and she's willing to continue to do that. We have a history. We have experts. We have provided the comments. We're not going to have to start from scratch. They're going to write a grant to the Federal Natural Resource Policy account, money that the governor's office receives from the legislature for local entities to be able to defend these plans. And we have been receiving this Federal Natural Resource Policy account funds through our partnership in that coalition of local governments. My problem with joining this coalition, they only have 11 counties, and he has been soliciting seriously hard to get them all on board. They're not all going to join, but there are a lot of counties that have not had the benefit of a coalition who need that coalition to help them. So I don't object to anything they're doing. I do object to this county joining them, watering down with 2 pretty much new entities who will be trying to write these comments, when we have a 12-year history of writing comments on every iteration of that plan that has come out. Because Biden and his administration has decided we start over with the sage grouse comments. And it's not all a bad thing. They're asking to do it as a Rocky Mountain area. There are 10 states involved. Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, a little piece of South Dakota, North Dakota, a little piece of Arizona, I believe, or Nevada. Anyway, there's 10 states involved. So that's not a problem, but we still can coordinate. But the big glitch is for us to sign on with this, they're going to write $100,000 grant. We already have a $38,500 grant because we don't need to start from scratch to do it. And it's double dipping in the governor's office into his fund. That's the problem I would have with this coalition trying to join that coalition to the governor's office in the FNRPA account. People, it's going to look like we're double dipping. We have the history. We have the record. We have no need to spend more money to join basically two amateur researchers who are going to be trying to write those comments. That's my major concern, and I would beg this commission not to join that coalition for those reasons. If you have any other questions, I guess, feel free to ask them, but legally, I don't think that we should join because of the governor's money.
Where do, point,
Thank you, Commissioner Tillman. Do you feel like we are a leader in this area as a
We
county?
are.
Do you feel like
They should
we
be
could take a
joining
lead?
us. They should have come to us instead of trying to form their own thing, but Devin Brubaker Palmer, she used to work for Devon Energy. She's going to help write those comments. She is not a lawyer. She is very knowledgeable about a lot of the issues. So I'm not objecting to her work or anything, but she has been working with a lot of the smaller counties that don't have the benefit of this coalition that we have had to be writing these comments. And Micah has had oil and gas industry expertise, but they don't have the 12 years that we've had with Connie Brooks and Danielle Betancourt. That's my issue. But the big issue is to ask for FNRPA money, to ask this county to help pay that match when we're already getting FNRPA money.
So you don't think that in this coalition, the new coalition, that we could be leaders and SMEs, as we say, subject matter experts on this, as
We've already volunteered to do that. I've offered our services. Danielle has volunteered to talk with Micah and WCCA, but it would weaken our position, in my opinion, to join that.
do you not feel as though perhaps we could get just crushed when there's 10 states getting together in this coalition and
We're
just our comments, we're that little chirpy squeaky wheel that we're going to get just steamrolled by, because here's this group that's so large that their voice will be heard and ours will not. Is there a concern there?
Absolutely not. We've got the science, we've got the history, we've got the record of 12 years of doing this. And it's on file with the BLM. It's public information. We've already been commenting for years. So we're not going to have to start from ground zero to try to develop those comments. We've already done them over and over.
and Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Commissioner Wendling?
Yeah, and I think because of where we're at as leaders, we could lead the whole coalition rather than stand on the sideline and see some things come forward that may not be appropriate or may not even fix. It's a matter of writing alternatives that will lead toward the best alternatives that deal with the sage grouse. I know where Commissioner Tillman's coming from, and I don't disagree with what the CLG has done. But whether it's double dipping or not, that's not for us. I mean, legally, sorry, Commissioner, but you're not legal. You're not even
Well, I
certified, but
couldn't recommend that we.
no, and that's fine. That's the way you're at. That's okay. I can recommend it because I can see it as a strength for the county. And you're exactly right. The attorney for CLG has that option to be a part of it and can lay the work out and say, hey, let's take a look at it. Let's be the lead. Yeah, I agree I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just saying, hey, here's an opportunity to even share and show how strong we are and be that lead that we think we are. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less.
Well, we can already do that. We already are
Well,
committed to
but
doing that.
we got a whole state. I mean, when are we going to stop thinking we're so much better than everybody else like some counties do? We need to
close there.
start thinking, hey, let's use our strengths and start helping other counties grow as well and be as strong and help them through their issues because we have the expertise. I'm a big one on that there's strength in numbers, and if we know something more than somebody else does, let's share it. Let's not be keepers of the gold. Let's share the gold so everybody's strong. That's all I have to say. And it's just a matter of the question, Commissioner. of whether or not we'll do it or not. And I just really believe there's an opportunity missed, and I understand where Commissioner Tolman's coming from, but the other three commissioners, you'll have to decide, because it's obvious we know where I'm going to vote, and it's obvious we know where Commissioner Tolman's going to vote. And that's just fine. Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman,
Thank you.
I'd just like to say one more thing. I did follow up. I talked to Jeremiah Reeman. I talked to Micah Christensen. I met with our coalition. We talked to them. I just feel that we are weakening and watering our position, but by joining this, there are 11 small counties who cannot afford to take and tackle this on their own, whereas we joined forces 17 years ago and have been tackling these issues. And we will continue to share what we're doing, but I see absolutely no advantage to joining that group and starting over when it's 11 very small counties who don't have anyone.
Thank you.
And that could be the case. I didn't ask for who the counties were.
Well, I did, so.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lloyd?
just a question for Commissioner Tolman, if that's okay. I guess, as I listen to, really, I'm relying on both of you guys for a lot of this information because you've been more involved in the sage grouse and this kind of issue than I have in the past. I guess what would be the hesitation, Commissioner Tolman, and partnering and having the CLG be part of this, because I just think it's greater numbers and it does allow us to bring in some of our education and knowledge, and having the opportunity to have attended a couple CLG meetings. I can personally say, I think there is a ton of knowledge and information that comes through there. So why is there seem to be a hesitation in the partnership?
It would simply be asking this county to join that coalition. We already have our own coalition. They are not asking for the coalition with the conservation districts and our whole group to join, and they're just asking for Sweetwater County. And we've just have strength of what we have done with our other coalition. We're already paying dues into that coalition. We've been working on it on the sage grouse alone for 12 years.
Thank you.
That's all I can say. I don't know how else I could stress how important it is that we maintain our strength and share and combine unified comments. That is not the issue.
Commissioner Shanefield?
Thank you. I just wanted to read through the counties. We have Washakie, Carbon, Bighorn, Niobrara, Park, Sweetwater, Converse, Weston, Campbell, Crook, and Teton.
Sizable.
Kind of.
We did not join
Not
as
little,
a county for when we did the WSA's, the Wilderness Study Areas. We had specific reasons for not joining that. I think we have specific reasons and strength for not joining this. And I object to the fact that they say we have joined already.
I think bringing WSAs in, Mr. Chairman, is a different topic. It's comparing apples to oranges.
Any other comments then? Then what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Wendling?
I'll make a motion that we move forward and join the coalition that's for the sage grouse amendments that is being organized through the WCCA, even though WCCA won't be heading it up. And I think it needs to be clear that the CLG that we're presently in part of is invited, our attorney's invited to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion at all? All those in favor say aye.
Chairman, roll
Yeah.
call vote.
Roll call vote. Well, we'll start at the far end. Commissioner Lloyd,
No.
Commissioner Tolman,
No.
Commissioner Shanefield,
Yes.
Commissioner Wendling.
Yes.
Oh, look how it is.
Be brave.
Commissioner Smith votes no.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith wants to change his vote. Commissioner Smith votes yes.
No, thank you.
So it passes 3-2. I just think there's value in numbers.
Thank you, Sally. Will you get a hold of Micah at WCCA and let him know? Make sure you read the motion to him or let him know the motion. So we do, if CLG wishes to be a part of it. Danielle is, she can be. Thank you.
We are on to for the good of the order. What do we have today, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lloyd.
I'll just give a couple of updates. I want to first kind of reiterate something that Commissioner Wendling talked about at the beginning, and that was just kudos to the city, the Chamber of Commerce, Rock Springs Chamber of Commerce Light Up Parade. It was a great event. I didn't really get to see many of the floats, but I do have to say that I did enjoy my time with Commissioner Wendling on the float, and I think we got our quota of Merry Christmas in. And I don't know if I'll say it again for the rest of the holiday, because I think we each said it at least 1,000 times, but it was a good time and a great piece. And I think when I look back in the last 4 years, and even any of my last 18 years in living in Sweetwater County, it's one of those events that really make you realize how great we have it here and how communities come together to support. And I think there's always a lot of examples, but I think that was a great one. I've continued to hit some of the liaison type assignments. We've hit the library meeting. I want to just thank Lindsay and her group for really, as we've really have had some significant cuts in that area over the last couple of years, 5 to 10 years, they continue to offer really great programming and support to this community that's really invaluable, that I don't think anyone really truly understands how much that goes through that building. Have spent some time at Golden Hour, and also participated in a meeting with Warden Jim Zimmerman to renegotiate the fire contracts that should be coming to us soon. So I won't be attending the WCCA meetings. I think as an outgoing commissioner, as great as those meetings are, I don't think it's the right way to spend taxpayer money going on my own, going up there knowing that I'm not going to be using that information in the future. So outside of that, we'll just continue to work. I'll continue spending some time with the new commissioners coming in and just kind of giving them updates and information, and working with the department heads and elected officials as we roll forward. I will be having my office hours tomorrow as planned and continued for the rest of the season. I will be a little bit late tomorrow at 3:30, but I will continue my regular office hours up through the end of the month. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd. Any other commissioners?
Yes,
Commissioner Tillman.
Chairman. Commissioner Wendling and I attended the the Sweetwater Outdoor Recreation Committee meeting on November 15th. It was exciting to hear that through the American Rescue Plan, the state of Wyoming had 117 applicants, 71 million. Funds were requested with a $13 million match. Sweetwater County, that means money for the Blacks Fork Overlook and Trail in the Flaming Gorge National Recreation Area of $407,000, the Wilkes Peak Trailhead Development, and the Skyline Loop Trail at the college will also receive additional funding. So those were the three, unless I think those were the only three that our county received. The Ashley National Forest, I attended a telephone cooperator meeting regarding the high Uintas in the Ashley plan regarding domestic sheep and bighorn sheep grazing. We also had a Pacific Atlantic Trona pre-decisional meeting with the BLM. The governor on December 1st filed an amended petition for review of final agency action. The BLM and the Forest Service halted the second quarter of 2021, the third quarter of 2021, and the third quarter of 2022 federal lease sales in Wyoming. And the secretary adopted an unwritten policy that stopped quarterly and oil gas leasing. There was a Louisiana court case that said they couldn't do that. They continued to do it anyway. So I am excited that the state of Wyoming has filed to protest that, because that hurts Wyoming. The petition of the state of Wyoming respectfully requests that this court set aside and declare that the secretary's decision to cancel The second quarter 2021 federal oil and gas lease sale in Wyoming violated the Administrative Procedures Act because they're making up rules as they went along, and the Mineral Leasing Act. B, declare that the secretary's decision to not hold the third quarter 2021 federal oil and gas lease sale in Wyoming was arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion or otherwise not in accordance with the law. And C, declare that the secretary's decision to not hold the third quarter 2022 federal oil and gas lease sale in Wyoming also was arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion or otherwise not in accordance with law. D, declare that the secretary's adoption of an unwritten policy pausing quarterly federal oil and gas lease sales was arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion or otherwise not in accordance with law. And E, enter other preliminary or permanent injunctive relief as the state of Wyoming may hereafter specifically seek the 40% that we would receive from those mineral royalties that were halted. Grant the state of Wyoming under F such additional relief as the court deems just and proper to remedy the secretary's violation of law and to protect the state of Wyoming's interests. This is huge. And I hope we can prevail in this case to restore our mineral sales, our oil and gas lease sales, because what they have done has been outside of the law that has required that they have those quarterly sales. And it's meant a lot of money to the state of Wyoming and to our county. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll just state that I am going to attend the executive board meeting of WCCA at the day before the general sessions start. Do take action at the time. They need a quorum to vote on some things. So I will attend that, but I won't be attending the regular sessions of the WCCA conference. And aside from that, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
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 And we are adjourned. We will head into our policy and procedure workshop. We got chapters 12, 13, and a revisit of 3 for a little bit. So need a break or should we head right in?
Quick break.
Quick break.
I only need 3 minutes.
Okay, 1:30. 1:30, we will re-adjourn.
our belt, and then one amendment that we're gonna add in section 3, and then hit 12 and 13. And then I think that should do it for us, if that's okay with the board.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So a couple meetings ago, we addressed chapter 8. And specifically, the question came up, we have someone, an employee who's now in January will be in the Wyoming legislature. So we've only had that twice in 9 years, something like that. It's been so. So this is a relevant and current policy. The previous policy, I'll just read it real quickly, is regular full-time employees who are members of the Wyoming State Legislature shall be granted leave with pay to serve in the legislature without loss of vacation or sick leave. Requests for leave must be made in writing by the employee and presented to the elected official or department head at least 30 days prior to the effective date of such leave, except in an emergency. The proposed policy, I'll paraphrase, but in short, the proposed policy is that the individual will be kept whole, meaning their salary will remain the same, but they'll turn back any salary portion that they receive from the legislature. Now, we had, I think, a fairly good discussion about that. There are obviously lots of things the legislature is compensated for. So they get mileage, they get a per diem amount, they get a constituent amount for holding town halls and things like that. So none of that, they would keep all that. That's reimbursement for actual expenses. There's also the $150 day that they receive as actual salary while they're in the legislature. The current policy has that coming back to the county in exchange will keep their salary whole. So last week, I spoke with Mr. Niemiec, who will be attending the legislature. He had some concerns, primarily around the fact that he had discussed with some people the policy as it currently existed at that time. That was prior to running for the legislature, which is different than what's been proposed here. And so from his perspective, and I think John's had some additional discussions for him, and I'll let him represent those. But from my discussions with him, his point is that he ran for the legislature with the understanding that this is how it be handled, and now the current policy changes that. I expressed to him, I'm not that I was concerned in terms of the changes, that how we would take a non-exempt, an hourly employee and pay them for work they hadn't done. Then some cases where we have exempt staff, maybe that's doable, but I didn't see how we could do that. I was concerned about whether that was even legally tenable or not. And I said we had a couple more policy meetings up, so thought we would address it and try to get that, and it is relevant. Like I said, I am, I guess, sympathetic from the standpoint, if you make plans on A and then it ends up being B, I guess I understand that, but policies are always changing and should change. But anyway, that should bring us up to speed with where we're at. I thought since the sheriff had waited, we could address this if you wanted to address anything first. Yeah. We kept him here all day, so.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, I've been here long enough that there's actually a sheriff's office employee that this whole policy, I guess, was created because of.
No, I was in place.
It was in place before, but
Before I was.
we did have a sheriff's office employee that was hourly that also went to the legislature. The previous policy, it was what we went by then. Now we have another employee that ran and was elected. Now the policy is going to be changed after he was elected. That's one of the issues I have. It also, to me, might make people not want to run for office. And we all know how difficult that is, putting forth the time and the money before, and then the hours and the time afterwards. I guess it'd be easier for people that might work in the private sector or have their own business. Unfortunately, some people, or fortunately, we work in the public sector, and we are the ones that go out there and represent the people and work for the people. And I think that's a benefit for Sweetwater County because we know where they're coming from. So there's a few things that I have issues with. Also, I don't think it should just be for the legislature. If we're going to do this, why not across the board as anybody that's an elected official? The legislature themselves tried to pass this bill. Former Senator Tom James tried to do this to keep people from being a public official and being elected at the same time, and it was voted down. I don't even think it made the floor because the legislature saw the importance of people that might be in public office. They have the right to serve also. So those are my 2 cents. Ultimately, it's up to you as far as this policy goes, but those are my concerns with it.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
What would you recommend? Do you have a recommendation?
I believe that he should still be paid. We do have other issues also. He's the commander of our bomb squad. Sorry, he's the commander of the bomb squad. He will be on call even though he's there. And I know we have on-call pay. It's a difficult situation, but I believe that he should remain whole and be able to receive the salary from the legislature also.
Yeah, Commissioner Smith, yeah, Chairman Smith, I guess, for me, it's, there's two folds to this issue. I think number one, I'm not necessarily opposed to the future of the policy change or even having the policy change to read the way it was, but I don't think it should negatively affect an employee that ran an entire election based upon what he thought would be what would happen. And I know policies change, but that would be a struggle. If we were to move forward in that policy, my recommendation would be a grandfather clause for the one employee based upon the fact that, you know, when you run for office and, you know, we're lucky, all four of us know what it's like. It's not an easy task. And I think as hard as it is to run an office, I think the difficult task is marinating and decide, hey, there I said it once, marinating and deciding, do I want to do this? And there takes a lot of tact to get there and to make that decision and to have that, the information presented be part of his decision would be that policy. The question then becomes if that policy was different, he may not have ran. And I don't think that's fair from an employee perspective. So that's just one of the ways I look at the situation. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Other comments?
Commissioner Smith, I think it was important just to reflect. We tried to, in drafting this, find some perspective in terms of where other agencies were on this. And I think I shared with the board, the state of Wyoming, you're just on legislative leave. So you go on leave and that's it. There's no salary or continuance. So you're just on like an administrative leave. There are other entities around the state, academic and otherwise, that do that also. There are entities such as Natrona County and others that follow some kind of policy along these lines. This is kind of similar to what we do for employees on jury leave, for example, so that they're not negatively impacted, but by serving on jury duty. So when they were paid for jury duty, they return that back to us also.
So what do we do for a hourly employee that's on jury duty?
It's the same issue. That's so they would receive whatever they're paid back from the jury duty per day amount back to the county and otherwise kept at their same salary.
But our proposed policy is saying
That
but okay. But the previous policy is saying perhaps we can do this with salaried employees, but hourly was difficult.
well, the previous policy is just saying that you'll receive your salary, your normal pay, and you will keep the per day salary paid by the legislature, not just the expenses. I don't think there's any discussion about the expenses because those are actually reimbursement for expenses, but the salary paid for the legislature. So It's a little bit hard to calculate how much that is because it depends on how many committees and things you serve on, but I think it's like $13,000 to $15,000 a year, can be a little bit higher.
I'm inclined to leave it unless it's illegal to revert back or leave it our old school way.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Winley.
what's the downside of grandfathering in for this one person and then leaving it this way? I mean, the new way.
Yeah, I think the issue is as long as we're okay for paying, with no work and paying that, I don't think there's anything. I mean, I think of all the issues, I probably don't agree with that as
No, I agree.
philosophically as a proposition, but I am sympathetic to the timing of the circumstances. And I think, which is why, you use a different venue. You guys approve salaries and things before the terms are up. So it's fixed for the term. This, what's being discussed is something similar to that. So I get that. And so I think that's certainly a viable option.
Well, what direction would we like to go then? What direction? would we
Mr.
like-
Chairman,
Commissioner Shanefield.
Oh, wow. And then there was light.
can you guys hear me okay?
Sure can.
Loud and clear.
Okay. Okay, perfect. I just want to make the comment, and I know that we're not private industry, but even myself working for the governor's office and being a part-time elected official, I still have to make up those hours, and I'm salaried. But I still have to figure out when I'm at a commissioner meeting how I'm going to work the additional hours to meet my 40-hour-a-week agreement. And so I just want to go back to that. I mean, we've kind of gone towards running the county a little bit more like a business. When I was at Simplot, I was still expected to work the hours that were required to do the job. And if I would have run for legislature, which I had discussion with many of you about that I would have been required to take time off or figured out how to make those adjustments. And so I think that there's many different perspectives on this. I think that the timing is really unfortunate. And I was also going to ask Gary, I don't remember when we decided on this change as a whole, the proposed new policy, but could you let me know what that is, please?
Yeah, so I mean, that the discussion of chapter 8 would have been the meeting before last.
Okay, thank you.
Well, after the election.
What
Mr.
direction
Chairman.
would we like your Commissioner Lloyd?
And just reiterating what Commissioner Shanfield, I don't disagree with her whatsoever. When I ran NowCap, I had to work my time. I just think in this case, we need to take a look at the specific example if we move forward in the policy and work within that, knowing that when he did say, I am going to run, it was based upon one policy set. That's all I'm saying. I don't disagree with moving forward at the way it's presented, but I think there should be at least a grandfather clause in for that individual that it would affect.
What's your, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So Commissioner Lloyd, it's doing the right thing versus doing things right, or doing things right versus the right thing.
Will you repeat that again?
Doing, so therefore it's doing the right thing versus doing things right. In other words, basically doing the right thing in this case would be, hey, through no fault of the employee, when he paid his filing fee and ran and got elected, policy hadn't not been discussed, but hadn't been changed yet. After he was elected, it got changed, even though we haven't approved it yet, but it's got changed. So my point is doing the right thing would be to resort back to the old policy for this one instance, and then adopting the new policy for anything future, if that's the belief of the group.
Do you feel it's illegal? Gary?
Well, one of the issues that we've discussed many times is about paying for time not worked as a public entity. Private entities, we don't care. So as you know, we've had this discussion a lot, even when we've had severance agreements and those things, that we are very clear that the county gets something in exchange for something. And in the case of a non-exempt employee, you're paying hour for hour by law for each hour of work. And so in this particular case, unlike, for example, sick leave or vacation, where you have earned benefits, meaning it's part of your compensation that you work so much and you receive a benefit of sick leave or vacation. This isn't that. This is saying that you'll be paid for time that you did not work hour for hour, and you will receive the benefit from the legislature. So, you know, there's this kind of double dipping component to that. And so I think that's the concern. As a public entity, there's a lot of attention and focus on that, not giving away money, but actually paying for services rendered.
You just declare it a holiday that costs the county taxpayers, I don't know, $100 and whatever $1,000 for one day. Is that
Right.
different?
I don't know if it's different, but the state legislature has empowered you to approve public holidays as a condition of employment. And so I mean, it's different in that respect, but I don't know if the net effect's any different.
Sure, yeah.
Just real fast, I mentioned that the bill that Senator James wanted to bring forward. An issue I had with that is myself being an elected public official, that bill would have not allowed me to go referee high school football because I get paid by the Activities Association. You can't forego that paycheck because there's legal fees and things like that, legal issues. Therefore, I would have had to pick one or the other. And the way that was written, I would have had to pick being a high school official over an elected sheriff's position. Those are some of the things that it was running into. So to be devil's advocate, it's kind of the same thing. State pays for two services. Is it double dipping? I don't know.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Winley.
I'm going to use myself as an example. That's a shame.
Feel
We
free.
can do a little better.
We could. When I was working full-time prior to being a commissioner, I drew a great salary and great benefits. Had I been elected as a commissioner, drawing that salary, there are places that would allowed me to keep my salary as well as the commission salary. And not a word said. For myself personally, why not? I get it. Even today, as I look down our table of commissioners, we have commissioners that get to keep their regular salary plus their commissioner salary. And that type of thing. I still want to do the right thing versus doing things right. And everything that took place with regard to this individual was timing wise. I think if we had done the policy, Gary, well before filing dates, and that person would have had to sit down and look at it and make a decision. I believe they looked at it and made a decision thinking, you know what, if this is the way it's going to be, I'm going to provide myself just a little bit better of life. And they shouldn't be deprived that if it's there. So I still going to lean in the direction of, Mr. Chairman, I think however the rules were in place, when it played out all the way to the end, that person was elected, time of election, we hadn't even had the conversation to change that policy. It was afterwards. And I have a hard time with that because it isn't right, it isn't fair in my book.
I'm inclined to not just grandfather this person in, but I'm talking about, should we even change it to
Well,
this new policy so
So
that, so that discourages people from running in the future. So yes, this person's in, but then 2 years from, a year and a half from now, whatever, somebody's thinking about running, but then they're like, oh, no, I can't.
not only this person, but we had one other working in the courthouse that was going to run. And
Yeah.
I would have loved that person would have been a great, great person to have down at the state.
Yeah.
As well as this officer. We got to find ways to reward those people and not stifle good people from running. And I'm of the mind that if we can agree sitting here let's change that policy back for right now, because it's the right thing to do based on the timing. I'll be honest with you, if everything had been done prior ahead of it and this came up now, my answer would be too bad. You knew what you're getting into. You make choices. So that's where I'm at.
That's where I'm at too, is let's revert back to the previous. Commissioner Tolman.
I think we should grandfather that employee in because he ran under the old rule, but if there are legal ramifications with hourly wage and that, maybe we need to research that more to be legal in the future, whatever that takes, or was that done?
Yeah,
I
I don't think we've spent a whole lot of time with that
No.
particular issue.
and to help out what Commissioner Tolman's saying, we're not going to approve our policies till next meeting.
Right, yeah, that's why we wanted to bring it up today.
Yeah,
That's
we'll,
why.
we'll go ahead and approve our policy the way it is, but it's effective from that point on. Not when we had the discussion of the changes.
No, I agree with that. But
Which then
obviously
would-
the concern was that the proposed policy would take in effect in January when the legislature starts.
Yeah.
So if we don't change it, then it just is what it is and it's what it
Oh, I
currently
see. You're
is.
saying when the legislature starts.
Yeah.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And, okay, and then what Commissioner Tolman's saying is we leave it as it is, without changing it, then Commissioner, you can bring that one back with your other new commissioners and change it at that time if you want to,
Well, if there are legal issues,
afterwards.
if there are legal reasons, we should probably take care of it now, but I don't.
I
know
don't
what-
think there is.
I don't know what they are, if there are, yeah.
See any
Commissioner
legal
Lloyd?
reasons, John?
John.
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, so I think I think the board has, in addition to the not gifting consideration, in addition to the idea of double dip consideration, how you weigh those issues, the other considerations that I think you've discussed related to this type of circumstance are in the handbook, the employee handbook, how to not using public resources for private gain or personal purposes. You also have a statute that addresses public funds, time, et cetera, for political purposes, which is addressing a little bit what Commissioner Shanefield is addressing there. So that's I think some of the, I guess, information that you've received or discussed as you've contemplated these matters, and would be information to continue to consider, not necessarily today. It sounds like potentially at the next meeting, but you can continue to contemplate that as you make your decision.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think the difference is like when you're reffing though, you're doing that on your own time. The problem with the legislature is it is an absolute time away from your job. So you're not able to make up the hours necessarily. It's just a separate issue. Whereas if you're doing your job and you're doing other things that on your own time, I think that's a little bit different than just being totally away from your job. But I don't know how you. Oh, well,
Well, Commissioner Tolman, Mr. Chairman, I think the issue is along these lines. Obviously, we have places where we're not paying hour for time work. You guys are paid. Many commissioners have worked and been commissioners and had to maintain their jobs and work around however their respective employers handled that. We're the custodians of the public funds in this regard. And we don't permit, as a matter of employment, for employees to work here and at the same time work somewhere else and be paid by us and be paid there. Now, is the legislature something different than that? It is. I mean, there's a component to it that's different, it's part of our governance as opposed to just employment. But you are paid a salary for that. They call it a salary for that. And so it's as though being paid a salary for both things. It was discussed with us from for the city councils. We've had more people obviously on city councils than we've had in the legislature. The city councils intentionally are in the evening. They draw salaries. They have meetings after work. As long as I've been here, that's never been a conflict with work. And I don't recall there ever being an issue with employees not being able to work and go to city council meeting in the evenings or some conflict with that, but we also aren't paying them both. So I think that's the issue. How about, so that we can move forward? How about if we do this? Well, I think the board's clear. It seems clear on the general consensus of where you'd like to be. And if there's no impediments to doing that, meaning if it's sustainable, that's the direction it sounds like we want to go, at least for right now, is just to keep the current policy if it's sustainable. And if we can't, then I'll come back with something stronger in that regard before the meeting, and we'll discuss that at the next meeting. Does that sound reasonable?
Thank you for moving us along. Yes.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you, Sheriff, for hanging out with us all day.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you as well.
The next one is dropping back a little bit with chapter 3. This is a policy that we've actually had in practice for a long time because of the federal legislation regarding workplace accommodations for nursing mothers. So that seemed to fit into the employment policies of chapter 3. So I drafted section 9 to comport with that federal rule. Are there any questions on that one?
Questions at all?
Just reads crazy.
Reads crazy?
No.
Well, I'll work
The
on my,
objective,
yeah.
gotta have a comment in there someplace.
Oh,
Good. Anything else?
okay,
No, it looks good.
All right.
okay. So that'll be in chapter 3.
Okay.
Thank you.
That seemed like the best place. The next section was the addition, something that's come up several times through in the audits. It's come up several times throughout the federal and state granting process. And it's come up a couple times when we've had complaints. And that's with respect to the addition of a whistleblower policy. So most organizations, most federal grants want to see some whistleblower policy where individuals who in good faith that are complaining that there's fraud or wastefulness in government spending of money can report that and have it investigated without fear of retaliation. So we had some language that sort of addressed that, but wasn't as clear. So I added section 2, whistleblower protection. That's on the 3rd page. And it basically defines a whistleblower, what the protections are. It doesn't mean that you can do it for bad faith reasons, like trying to harass people. It just means that if you're aware of some government fraud or misconduct, that you should be free to report it to the proper authority and have it investigated without fear of retaliation. Any questions with respect to the whistleblower?
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Good. I think it looks good. I do,
Okay.
but I don't know. Roy? Lauren, what do you think of it?
Looks like we're good.
I think it looks good.
I do
Thank-
too.
Thank you.
Chapter 13 is just a complete rewrite. Mostly because chapter 13 has to do with technology, and as all of you know, there's probably no more changing topic than that. I spent quite a bit of time with the IT director, Tim Knight, trying to make sure that some of these things were addressed here as policies of the board. As you know, all of us, whether we work under the board or in an elected office, are using a shared technology platform. We share the internet, we share servers and routers and email handlers and lots of other things. So there were two specific things that I included in here. One is the acquisition of technology, that it be done in a way that utilizes the systems, that we not be duplicitous in the allocation of resources, that we try to minimize when we make software and hardware choices to use things that are compatible with our network. And then we get approval from the IT department before we make those commitments as to the compatibility and what have you. And so that's kind of section 2, but that's kind of the first major component. The rest of that section have to do with some pretty important issues. And there are areas where we need to be strong and comfortable with, and we'll need to do some training with supervisors. But we talk about privacy. Obviously, this is a system that's provided for the use of individuals to do their job. It's not for personal use. It's not for running other businesses. It's not for anything. It's for conducting county business. And so as such, there should be no expectation to privacy on the network. If we need to look into that, then there should be no expectations, much like other parts of the office and those things. One of the things I did break out, and I think it's sort of the theoretical versus the practical, which is that the notion that there's no personal use doesn't exist. As most of you know, people use the phone. Somebody's kids or family needing to get hold of them will call on the phone or come in the office. So we recognize that there is a de minimis amount that's okay if you need to confirm an appointment, if you need to be contacted in an emergency situation, but that it should never impact the functioning of the network. It should be kept to a minimum. It shouldn't be done during work time, so on and so forth. So, so that's section 3. Obviously, people have pictures on their computer for their family or screensavers. I think we want to encourage a manageable amount of that and a reasonable amount, but not things that impact the network. The next section 4, try to be very clear about some common problems. And this addresses specific prohibited activity, things that you just can't do. So obviously using the network or the computer resources for unlawful activity, personal use, except de minimis amount, inappropriate material, vandalism, financial gain. Obviously, we include all these because at different times we've had all of these happen. So these are very specific ones. So I thought it was important to provide a list of the things that are known. I'm sure that'll change as we go on. Some that aren't as common, if you go to G, which is on page 3, is interference with county technology resources. Sometimes people will install programs and software that'll actually shut down the system because either its size or how much bandwidth or cause conflicts with that. So that's an inappropriate use. Playing games on there is one that's been a problem. So that I think is an important one to be specific on. The other one that's
we're not, somebody clicks on an attachment to an email and it opens the malicious something. We're not necessarily prosecute or, holding them.
No, really what we're trying to do though, is we're trying to encourage people, and we'll get to that a little bit, to report that as soon as possible. So I just obtained some really current training through our property insurance provider on those exact issues. And we're trying to figure a way to get that into a training program out, because That's probably the number one issue. In fact, not probably, the number one issue is email security. And most of the things that result in bigger scams come from breaching email, like redirecting it to somewhere, or you click on an email and then they sit on your network and they get all the data that you have, or they learn your patterns. We like to tell people not to send privileged information through email, but we all do it to some extent or another. We have a pretty robust system that encrypts protected information, so long as it knows that it should be protected information. So if the user doesn't do something like, hey, confidential or encrypt, it may or may not pick that up, but we do have the ability to send encrypted emails through the system. But the awareness, I think, is something that's a huge issue in that area, and it's getting bigger all the time because the criminals are getting better at it. Kind of part of that thing is the misrepresentation. So this specifically prohibits you from sending out emails representing yourself. You've probably had some of these that are malicious, representing yourself as someone else other than who you are. We're not permitting that. It's one of the biggest scams out there. So we for a while had a bunch of scams that I'd get an email saying, hey, this is Mary, and I want you to change my payroll information to this new account. And it's from, Mary Tolman. They get it close. They wouldn't quite get it right, but they'd get it close. I know her email address, so I knew that wasn't her, but there's a lot of those type of things. So false identity and misrepresentation are a couple express ones. And similar to that is altering attribution information in email. Destructive software is another one that's out there. Again, this gives us the ability to clearly address the issue with people that use software to hold data hostage or to destroy data after they get it by encrypting it such that we can't access it. Virus contamination, obviously is a big one. And so this is a fairly extensive list. Remote or unprotected access. This is one that in the past wasn't as important. Today, it's really important because more of us work mobily and from remote locations. And so the importance of this is that what it's saying is you can't access the county network except through a VPN connection. And we have really good tools to do that. But if in any way you're accessing that network not through that VPN connection, that's a violation of policy. It also creates a breach that someone could exploit to access our network. Software piracy. We've probably all done this at some point in our life, but right now, the ability of companies to monitor licensing agreements has gotten much better, and it can result in us losing or paying fines or losing our licensing agreements as the county. So we want to make sure people understand that. And then we have just kind of a list of things that we don't want people doing. I'm sure there's going to be more. Section 5, we spend quite a bit of time here talking about the use of email. Again, for the reasons that I mentioned, because this is an area that's a source of so much fraud. But we also want people to use it appropriately, not to beat people up, not to, people tend to be more emboldened when they don't have to deal with people face to face. And so there's also some guidance here in terms of saying, hey, before you send something because you're mad, before you say something before you're mad, think about that. We need to be civil in email communications, just like we do with other forms of communication. Number 6 is about confidential, protected, and sensitive information. There's a lot of important things here. So one of the things is that in each department and elected official, there are certain people who are custodians of the records in that area. And those people are responsible when there's a request, a public request, or other request for information to determine whether that is public or not public. It's not the run-of-the-mill employee. It's not whoever thinks that it might be public to decide. There's a process to go through with that. And that while there's most of our information is public, there's certainly data that's not, and it's not appropriate. And disclosing that using our network is inappropriate. And then the section 7, these are just some safety and security policies. Obviously, we're, as I've indicated, have some training targeted in this area. But we included some of the important things that we take for granted that we think everybody knows. On average, the county has a little higher than average workforce, so we have some users that are not very good. And so I think it's good to be continually vigilant in this regard. So obviously passwords, every once in a while you run across somebody who's still sharing their passwords. We had an incident at the Western Wyoming Community College at one time where an individual may have been negatively impacted because they were leaving their machine on so someone else could use it as though they were them. Passwords do not imply privacy. I mean, just because you have a password doesn't mean that the county doesn't have the right to access the information. And then we provide some password policy because every user is not just accessing our network, they're accessing cloud resources, they're accessing software programs, they're accessing online resources. So we provide what is kind of some industry standards for password security. One of the most important of those is multi-factor authentication. Under our property insurance right now, we're trying to apply for an enhanced level of cyber coverage. But we have to have organizational-wide MFA in order to be able to do that. And so we provided some guidance to people because not all of them are just your credentials to get on the network. You're creating passwords for all kinds of software applications. And so there's some good general guidance there. And then Section 8 is important because we've made a transition from paper documents to electronic documents. Many of the records of the county are actually records of the state, and they have a state records and archives department. And they have people who are professional archivists to help develop policies for file retention, length, time, format, so on and so forth. And so what this is really saying is that the network provides backup copies for the purposes of keeping the network running, but the IT department is not archiving them. That's not archival stuff. Each department and document manager needs to work with the state and other resources to develop their own appropriate retention policies based on the records that they're holding. So in many cases, there's state statute that governs. Sometimes there's federal laws that govern it. What's worked really well with the state is we draft a policy, we send it down to them, and they give us some feedback, and that's kind of consistent with the state rules. But it's important for people to understand that just because we're backing up doesn't mean that that's the archive solution for that. If we move it to an archive, there's different rules. And then the last section is just about violations of this policy that will investigate complaints. If there's any illegal use, obviously will involve law enforcement, and that there will be penalties up to including termination for those things. So
That's a hefty one. Thank you.
a little bit, yeah. And I'm sure there's plenty more, but I think where we've stopped at this is after this, Tim's folks will be developing. Well, we have a section we'll attach that's more specific to our network. That we can maybe add as an addendum or do as part of training. But I think overall, these are the areas that are real important to address at this point.
And like you say, they'll continually
Change, yeah,
and
yeah,
carry on for who knows how long. Yes, a living document.
yeah.
Any questions or comments for Gary?
Chairman,
Commissioner Wendling?
question for our Assistant County Attorney, Mr. De Leon. You've been following along as we've been doing all these policy changes. Are you comfortable with them?
Yeah, I gave you the information that you guys needed for your consideration. Don't have any additional concerns to identify.
Thank you.
Okay.
Questions for Mr. McLean?
Yeah.
Okay, Gary. Two things. With this, with all the policies in general now, through this one. First off is I see I'm been part of a lot of changes. And some are pretty significant. How will these be communicated to employees? I mean, even though they've had a chance to follow along and that type of thing and listen, there still needs to be,
Yeah.
how will they be communicated?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of a mixed approach. So we've talked about that. I think that in the area, for example, let's use a current one with the IT policy. That's an area that we're going to want to have at least one of our IT staff talk about so that they can explain how that integrates into our system. There are other areas in here that I will be doing the training with the department heads on. And then there's areas where we expect the department heads and elected officials to communicate kind of continuously within their departments. And so we'll be pulling those out individually. The initial solution, as I indicated, we've done a couple things. I think you've seen some of that. And for the next meeting, you'll see this up. So we've broken each section out instead of having it in a big, long section. You can just go to the individual sections and click on those. And that'll be up if the board adopts those, that'll be up there. So they'll be immediately available to employees to begin reviewing those. And then those really important areas and those where there's been significant changes, such as this IT section, we'll be getting with them to communicate through whoever the appropriate voice is to be doing that. So that's kind of the plan for right now.
And finally, has there been any thought or discussion? Because I know in some organizations, employees need to sign off that they've
Yep, absolutely.
understand and
Yeah.
read that.
So a couple things we're wrestling with in that regard. We have as part of our onboarding system, which is all electronic. When you apply and you go through that process, that's all online, is to have it done. Is it better in there before you leave and go, or because it can be done remotely and electronic through electronic signature, or afterwards, after you've had a time to ask questions and get additional information. But in either format, it's going to be some sort of electronic recordation in the electronic personnel system. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Good work.
Yeah, very good.
One additional
Very
comment, if I can make before I leave, I just wanted to jump on something that Commissioner Lloyd mentioned, and this is just an FYI. Relative to the library discussion, we've been working for quite a while with the library system. It was halted after Jason left. The city of Rock Springs and the school district. I think I've talked to the board about this because the downtown library is it's a joint venture, for the lack of a better word, with the city of Rock Springs, with the school district, with the city library board and the county library system. It's been very difficult being clear about who's insuring what. And I feel like there's in the state of ambiguity that it's difficult to clearly say that we're not over insuring or duplicate insuring some of the property, specifically the art and exhibits and things like that. So what we've done for right now is I've compiled all the information that we have. I've asked the library director to work with the school district to get the agreement regarding the school art collection. We've obtained the agreement from the city of Rock Springs back from 1990 or 1984 regarding that. And once we get that, we're going to sit down and try to clean that up and either create a master agreement or do something to pull that together so it's much clearer who's responsible for what and that property. And if you haven't been down there, the east half of that property actually was on property owned by the city. Part of it was owned by the county. There was a board, a city library board that made an agreement with the county Carnegie Library Board. And the school district placed the art exhibit formerly at the school library, high school library, in the Fine Arts Center. And with the agreement that they would insure it, at least that's what I understand from everybody, but we don't have all that in hand. And so it's a real cluster in terms of, we've made a little progress when Amy Allen was at the city. We did get the street vacated. The city hadn't even vacated the street that portion was on. So we got that done and got it surveyed. But it's just one of those things that I think historically kind of grew in pieces. And so we're cleaning that up. And so just to be clear, we're moving ahead with that, and we're hoping in the next 2-3 weeks to have all of the agreements together so we can create a working file and then figure out how to move forward. So that one's underway.
It's funny how things over time, just a little bit here, a little bit, that sounds great. Oh, that's good. Great. And if you don't know the history or where things were, it's just oh yeah, we'll do that. It can be real messy all of a sudden.
Yeah, well, in that building, I mean, if you think of the ownership you have, and you have an art exhibit that I think at least a portion of is owned by the school district, and it's now, valued at several $1 million, many $1 million. And then you have art that's not the school districts, it's within that. And then you have a building that the county owns and the city owned part of and own the land of it. Yeah, it's just, so we'll get that cleaned up. But we're just finally getting all the agreements together, and thanks to Amy and Matt over there for Bird Dog and the city agreements, and the library director for Bird Dog and with school, their part. So soon we'll have it all together. So just wanted to let you know, we'll eventually get that done here as soon as we get those agreements. So thank you for.
Thank you for the update. Anything else for this policy and procedures? Okay, we will call it a day. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, John. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.